During the depths of the Great Depression in the 1930s and into the early years of World War II, the federal government supported the arts in unprecedented ways. For 11 years, between 1933 and 1943, federal tax dollars employed artists, musicians, actors, writers, photographers, and dancers. Never before or since has our government so extensively sponsored the arts. The project saved thousands of artists from poverty and despair. Will we need to see or get to see anything like that as the COVID-19 pandemic hits hard on arts and culture in our communities?
Los Angeles County is large, and so as one of the largest and most diverse counties in the nation, that means that our reach and our jurisdiction encompasses 88 different cities, Los Angeles City, of course, the largest of them, and more than 10 million people, with 81 different school districts and more than 220 languages spoken here, which I'm sure you know. So of the more than 480 or so diverse organizations that we support, they range from theater to dance to media to museums, and many of them have deep cultural ties to our communities. So these are organizations like the Japanese American National Museum, which makes sure we never forget the Japanese internment and the Japanese American experience. The Skirball Cultural Center, which for so many years has not only brought about lenses on Jewish life, but really a universal experience. Cornerstone Theater Company, or the Pan-African Film Festival, East-West Players, one of the longest running theaters of color that we have in the nation that puts forward an AAPI lens. These are all examples of organizations that we fund and support. So when our communities or your readers go to their performances or want to know what's happening with these organizations, part of how they exist and operate and provide what collectively across all of the field are 13 million visits or experiences every year here in LA County through the arts nonprofits. That's in part due to support by funders and public sectors like mine. But we have more museums here than many other cities around the country, and theaters as well. So we have more than 200 museums. We have about 279 art galleries. We have more than 500 heritage or historical sites. We have more than 300 theaters, independent theaters. And these are all in addition to the hundreds of live music venues or major concert halls, movie theaters, bookstores, literary arts, and of course our huge county and various city library systems as well. And so within that, we see performing arts organizations, about 226 of them at least. There are a number also of community-based organizations of every kind. So when COVID hit the arts sector quite hard. You might recall that even before there was a stay-at-home order, performances, films, movie theaters, cultural venues had to stop and shut down right away in March. And so what we have seen is that nationally, we track the data from Americans for the Arts and other colleagues, and we know that the impact on arts and culture, the sector nationally, is now reached more than $12 billion impact of lost revenue and unanticipated expenses. We also know nationally there are more than 5 million creative workers in this sector, many of them now out of work. Here in Los Angeles County, based on reports and surveys of the field of arts nonprofits, we've seen collectively more than $20 million of financial impact just on 250 of the arts nonprofits that responded. We've seen 39% have already dipped into financial reserves, 40% have furloughed or laid off staff, and 78% are worried about a decline in philanthropic giving. And we've seen, sadly, a high percentage, about 50%, that say they're worried about even surviving as an organization after COVID. So the support of the field is necessary. Now, I want to share also that even before COVID, because we're talking about the arts nonprofits, vital as they often are undercapitalized. So not a lot of cash on hand, and a lot of the community-based organizations or smaller budget organizations and those that really reflect and serve communities of color and other kinds of culturally rooted practices often don't have the same access to donors or to large amounts of capital. And so that's really a lot of times the focus of our work, where a lot of our grant programs, for example, the majority of the organizations we support are small and mid-sized organizations, including many that serve our historically marginalized communities. So some of the ways we've responded to COVID is that we've put a lot of resources on our website. So definitely lacountyarts.org. We have a digital resource center, digital arts resource center, that includes not only grants that we have, but an assortment of relief grants for individual artists, for nonprofits, and for others in the sector. We also share there some examples of arts organizations that are providing programs and services online. Shifting to virtual formats has been a huge impact of this moment. And so we've seen that. We've seen 70 to 80% of organizations are trying to still serve their communities in these innovative ways, even if they're not getting paid. So supporting that is there. We also have resources of how you can support creativity at home. Our schools, and there's a big digital divide, but our schools and our youth and families have lost those 13 million experiences a year. And so trying to help and provide creativity at home is there as well. So we also accelerated our grant payments to get those out the door, in addition to our regular grant programs and opportunities that we have on our website. Is we were able to make available $10 million from the county's CARES Act relief that we are going to be putting out the door very shortly for the hard-hit arts nonprofit sector. So we announced that a few weeks ago, and now starting, I believe, next week, we will be increasing the communications and releasing the guidelines for the COVID-19 Arts Relief Fund from the CARES Act. So, I think as anyone can attest, not just the arts, but all of you, this is such an unprecedented moment. We know that there are multiple crises. So the COVID health pandemic, but the resulting economic crisis, and really a crisis of confronting systemic inequity, systemic racism, and the need to center those voices and really find new ways to reimagine how we invest in communities and what things like public safety mean. Because this is just a moment where we know there's no going back to how things were before. And in some ways, that's a good thing. I'm a fan of the never waste a crisis. So if we're going to have this moment, what gains can we make? What changes can we make? And so for us, we see the way forward in arts and culture as a few key things that I want to highlight to close. One, when we think about equity, we must also think about what we call cultural equity and inclusion. That is that everybody deserves access to arts and culture, no matter your background, your income, or your geographic location. And all of our artistic and cultural forms should be recognized, valued, and supported. So we can't turn away from the arts. They're not just a nice to have. They're not just for elites. We have lots of studies we can point to that show you that having cultural resources in communities, you actually see better outcomes for that community in education, in health outcomes, and in public safety, and that it supports our well-being. Students who have access to creative outlets in school, they stay in school longer, they're more engaged, right? So all of these things are part of healthy communities. So we need the arts to be part of recovery efforts. And I'll also say that we know that the way forward will be new, and there will probably be more innovations and more blended virtual and in-person ways to experience the arts, but that we've got to continue to addressing equity and ensuring access and looking at the arts as a trusted partner for all of us in our healing, our creativity, and our economic recovery going forward.
Are you ready to rally? I can't hear you. I said you reporting from quarantine in your house in front of your laptop. Are you ready to rally? Are you ready to throw blind fanatical support around a candidate who makes promises and maybe delivers on half of them? Are you ready to project all your hopes and dreams onto what I will convince you that I am? Are you ready for me to stop screaming at this volume from the side of my computer? Well then please, give it up for your favorite and forever public servant, Christina Wong!
Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. You know, I could have had today's rally on tour where it was scheduled in Hawaii or New England, where I was supposed to actually be this week, but I was like, you know what? No thanks. Give me an audience that had to crawl up from bed, sit upright at their desk at home, put their kids in the other room during a global pandemic, because they are the rowdiest runs. Am I right, America? Now, some of you may know me as Christina Wong, the performance artist. Some of you have no idea who I am because I am a performance artist. What you are witnessing now started 3 years ago as a purely performative campaign where I rallied for a political seat that I had not even filed to run for. I did things like debate a dog. It's a very cute dog. I won both debates. It was a poodle mix. Meet and greets on Hollywood Boulevard with an actual political puppet. I even did focus groups with voters to see if they would notice when I plagiarized speaking points from political dictators throughout history. Fun fact, most voters think that Stalin is a quirky guy with a big vision. But after 3 years of those shenanigans, I come here rallying to you tonight as a performance artist turned real life politician. I may have never grabbed anyone by their genitals without their permission. I may not be able to get us into war with Iran or a dead senator war hero or with windmills. I may have never paid off a porn star. In fact, I may have never paid for porn. But despite all those shortcomings, I was able to prove to my constituents that I have what it takes to serve in public office. Last April, with 71 votes, if you do not count the vote that I cast for myself, I became the real-life elected official of Subdistrict 5, Wilshire Center, Koreatown Neighborhood Council. And now I am a performance artist turned politician. COVID hit in the middle of a tour I did in Sacramento. I was at a community college 30 minutes before the show ended. All the students got a text on the phone saying that the campus was going online the next day. I had no income lined up. This whole national tour I had set up, postponed. I was like, there's no way I could do this rally from my house. People were like, just stream it online. I'm like, you do not understand that theater, like teaching, it's not the same thing online. But lo and behold, here I am. I have an election themed show. Was inspired by my director, Diana, who also has transferred her show online. And this is my home. This is a rally I do in my house. This is how this is my Steadicam, which is basically, can you see this as an office chair with 2 Tupperwares on it. So I put this on this chair, and I in lieu of a light change that might happen in theater, I'm like, I do different scenes of the show in my house. I tell different stories. I tell a story about how I ended up on a ballot because I got so high, basically, that I was seeing things. I got really high one night, and then when I came out from being so super high, I woke up on a ballot, right? So I basically had to adapt this one person show for a rowdy audience in my actual home. It's become quite intimate. I feel I did lose some engagements because those theaters basically couldn't stay afloat. And it's often said in the arts community that universities and colleges are the largest patrons of living artists that there are, whether that means giving artists work as professors or presenting artists at schools to students. So those venues have been the ones that have been able to honor contracts that we were negotiating at the time or bring me. And I have a little bit of an advantage in being able to present my shows online in that it's timely, it's election themed, right? It's one person addressing the camera. So if I was in a situation where I was running a 10-person dance company, I'd obviously have a much harder time translating that online. But I'm basically living on top of my on top of my set. My bedroom is over there. My fireplace used to be there. What can I say of this? So it's been a little bit of a nightmare, but at this point, I feel like the content of the show is so important. I spent 3 years running for office as research for the show, creating this show, and it's so important that folks vote. So I got an article that there was a shortage of cloth face masks for nurses, doctors, and essential workers. And I was like, oh, I sew. I have something essential I do. And long story short, and like 6 months later, I still run a group called the Auntie Sewing Squad. A lot of us are artists who have no income, who lives have been turned upside down by this, but we know how to sew. These are skills that maybe we've used to sew costumes or set pieces, and now we're making medical equipment. Why are we still sewing 6 months later when there are now cheap masks all over the street and flooded the market? Well, as it turns out, something called structural racism has made it possible for many communities to not even be able to access very cheap masks. So at this point, we are no longer making masks for hospitals and frontline workers in big cities who make salaries, but we're making masks for indigenous communities. What has been so great about our Auntie Sewing Squad community is that we were all strangers to each other. We organized on a Facebook group. My own mother sews in the group. She's in San Francisco. We're all over the country, and we've become like a family of folks who work together to identify where the most vulnerable communities are, and make and not in such a way like offering charity, but offering a sort of solidarity offerings that acknowledge their work, their labor, their own sovereignty, these communities, in supporting them with masks and protection.
When the pandemic came and I was rehearsing a play about immigration with students from colleges, and we have to not finish it, not produce it or perform. And what has been the effect that we have for our theater company and some of the theater companies in LA, especially the Latino theater companies or the African American theater companies or the Asian American theater companies. We are very few theater companies of color in the LA County. Very, very few. I mean, I think it's 3 Asian theater companies, or 2 really, 2 players at work. I think is one of them, and then the East is West as the Asian companies, and then African American companies like 3 or 4. Understanding that most of them, their budgets are super low, very little, small budgets, the ones that these companies have, especially the African American companies. The Latino theater companies, I think we have like 4 in a city that is predominantly Latino, meaning I think we're 51% or 52% of the community. Asians, I think, are 30% in the LA County. And the amount of companies that are not, what they were talking about, capital or being, capitalized by, we don't even think about that. Meaning we kind of, companies of color in LA, I think, kind of survive by the work that they do, day by day and month by month. I mean, the Latino theater company, because we've been together for 35 years, we may be one of the most established companies here with a bigger budget, and the effect that had on us, I mean, we had to cancel everything. We are experimenting with digital programming, whatever that means. Somebody was asking if that makes money. That makes no money. It's worse than live theater. We don't make money even when we're performing in live theater. Forget digital. It's like a sad view of, So, and the reality, what is going to happen, I think, mean, my concern is that many of the small theater companies won't survive this crisis. Yes, because we don't even know when are we going to be able to open. We don't even know when are we going to be able to do work together. And like I say, I mean, doing digital work is great to engage the community, but it really means no money at all. And because our budgets are lower than the regular budgets, when you ask for a grant, you know, they give you the highest maybe that you can get is a group, but our budget is low. So if you get $20,000, meaning which is what I get, you know, $22,000 is what the county will give me as an organization a year. My light bill is 10,000 at the LATC a month, you know, and forget the security and forget the clean, you know. So it's really difficult, and we don't know. I mean, we hope we think we'll survive, but I think about Casa 101 or you know, or the other small Latino theaters that are so important to the community because what they do is such an important work. So the only, where do these people see themselves? Where do these people see work that relate to them? Where do these people can come and gather together and talk about who they are as a community? If it's not in our theaters, even if they're small or larger, you know, and this is the only thing that they have. But as you know, meaning the main institutions don't offer anything for our communities at all. You know, so that's not going to be a solution for them. And if we disappear as a cultural hub for the people who live in their communities, and I'm talking about the entire United States. I'm not just talking about this is who this is what the community got to, who identifies with them, who can speak to them, who can talk about their issues, who can talk about their dreams, whatever it is, you know, who give them some sort of cultural relationship to the world. And if we're not here, meaning those communities are going to be more devastated. And you know, I mean, we're talking about how politicians don't support the arts at all. And why is that? Because we went through 40 years almost without giving arts education in the schools. So our politicians now, who are 40 years old, they had no relationship to the arts growing up. They have no interest in the arts at all. And because they were never taken to the theater, they never taken to a show, they were never having art classes in the schools. And all of that causes the effect that now they are in some position of power and have no relation to the art. So it's so hard to try to get our political appointees to say, you know, support the arts, support the artists in your community, because they have no relationship to it. Mm-hmm. And they're not interested in it.
I'm a working artist. I'm a graphic designer, illustrator, painter, muralist, dabble in video and all this. As the pandemic started, I realized right away that Imperial Valley, where I'm from, was not getting hit yet, but when it did, it went off the roof. And as you see, when we see the mapping, we see California and we see a red spot. That's Imperial Valley, way down at the border. We're very far away from those major cities. Disparities here hit very hard. Just the economic impact, unemployment, and on top of that, the pandemic. As it is, this Imperial Valley has very few arts groups. It has no major museum. There's no major art establishments. It's a community centers that serve as multi-purpose. That's what we have. So as I was invited by the Imperial Valley newly created Equity and Justice Coalition to, they were asking artists to come together to see what we can do in response to the pandemic in our Imperial Valley. And I was quite eager to join, simply because as a painter, I didn't want to paint anymore what I was painting. I was now painting pandemic subjects because that's where I was living. And I figured that this was something that I had to do because, you know, your mindset is different. Some of my clients' projects were on hold. Other projects were, you know, just moved for future months. So I put all my energy into working with the Equity and Justice Coalition. And as they got together over 20 artists through Zoom, wonderful people, which I really haven't met, but we became become very good friends all through Zoom. And they formed a series of questions to us artists of how to commemorate the suffering, the deaths, how to lift spirits to the community. What can we do to demonstrate a reaction? And I said, you know, it's exactly what I've been pondering, what I've been doing, and how do I share this work that I've been doing? I've been submitting into contests for posters. I've been sharing it with friends, and here was an opportunity now to organize something. So 3 ideas came about. One was to create a virtual art show. Everything is virtual, as we all know, and you know where it takes us, it's going to be in unison how we all get impacted and how we're able to use this technology. But it is virtual, and we figured it would be a week long, September 28th to October the 2nd. We're asking anybody who is connected to Imperial Valley in any way. You don't have to live here. You could have passed by and know what this county is, and you want to submit anything from a graphic to a poster to a message. If you're a poet, you know, whatever you want to submit, there is a link in for you to submit, which will become a website where we will host the virtual art gallery. Other projects came out of the same meeting, which is a poetry night. That poetry night will begin on the 24th of September, which will really kick off this ongoing series of reaction art that I call it, because the pandemic really got us together. Here, people of all ages, I'm kind of on the older age, but there's artists who I didn't know about, but I like their work because I'm already getting familiar with their creativeness and their poetry and writers. And I'm just very proud to see them come out. If a pandemic is what it took, and then it is something that we have to look at in terms of innovation. Third project will be to create later on in the next month, because the pandemic is going to be here and we want to keep lifting spirits, is to do an outdoor art show with the entries that are submitted on the virtual art show. Basically blow them up, put it in a place where people can do their walking outdoors and drive by their cars and be able to enjoy the art at a safe distance and sort of work this way. What we're doing for the artists here is allowing them a place to submit their art without judging, as long as it's, you know, in the theme of hope and resilience to Imperial Valley. We're asking for anything for any age to submit. There's a small entry form that you fill up. If you happen to have no money but you want to create something, we've actually developed a small budget that will be helping you get the material so you can, you know, submit something and not let money be an obstacle. We'll help you get the supplies. Also, a lot of artists that we've been talking to are talking about their impact. So we are eager to share relief funds information through the Equity and Justice Coalition. They're a great sponsor, great group of people that are very much in support of the arts and the community in general, because they deal with rent moratoriums and many other crucial subjects. Here is an opportunity for us as artists to react, to say, Imperial Valley is resilient. We've been through a lot. We have all these disparities, but yet we will prevail. We will come out of this, and we want to give people that hope that artists haven't forgotten you. Even though there are arts districts and groups in Imperial Valley, we are artists, and we might not be able to, you know, help a patient or be an essential worker, but I believe art and expression is essential. And if we can lift spirits by having a child's message be on that art show, or a poem that somebody writes because of how they feel with the despair, or their personal trauma, or their personal message of hope, whether it's graphics or painting, we want to historically put these together in one place that we can look back and say, we are resilient and we have learned, and now we want, and I'm going to jump the gun to the future, we want a museum, we want an art center, we want the artists to have attention, and we don't want all these pieces, we really want help. And if the government can jump in, we appreciate it. Personally, I would love to see that.